Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar on the New York State cybersecurity legislation. We're going to be looking at the requirements of that legislation for risk management, application security, and CISO appointment. I'm Alan Calder. I'm going to be your host today. My background is one that goes back over some 15 or 20 years in information security. I'm though not a technologist, I'm a business person, and my involvement in what's now the international standard for cybersecurity management, ISO 27001, has been behind the creation of this business, IT governance, and we as an organization have now become a leading global provider of products and services to help organizations get cybersecurity and compliance programs in place that are effective. We've got a team of trainers and consultants that work with clients around the world. We have trainers and consultants in the continental United States, in the UK, across the European Union, and we engage with business managers, directors, C-suite to help our clients protect their intellectual capital, comply with relevant regulations, particularly like the NYDFS, and to, through better IT management, help achieve your business goals. We're going to be talking today about the requirements around application security program, the risk assessment policy and procedure requirements, how to set up a program that's specific to your own organization's information systems and business operations. We'll look at the cyber threat landscape and how that links into the types of controls that you should be selecting, the idea of an appropriate audit trail that includes detection and detection of and responses to cybersecurity events, and then we'll look at how an international best practice standard like ISO 27001 can help demonstrate that you have actually met the requirements of the regulation in a way that should enable you to deal with the possibility of legal actions and other issues arising from the regulation. The webinar is, while we're talking about timelines, is planned to last over a maximum of about an hour. I'm expecting that what I'm going to be saying will take around about 45 minutes or so. As I'm talking, it may well be that there are questions that you want to ask. Please do so in the GoToWebinar panel. There is a section called questions. Please use that now or as and when you need to type in any questions that you've got. When we come to the Q&A section of the webinar, I'll then go to the questions, and I'll pick out those questions that there's time to answer, and I'll read the questions out and then tell you what the answer is, assuming of course that I know the answer. Usually the first question is something along the lines of, will the slides be available to us? And the answer is yes. The slides will be available. They'll be sent out in the course of the next 48 hours or so to everybody who's registered on the webinar. So we're going to be talking today, as we said, about the NYDFS regulation, the compliance deadlines for which are broken down. It's the 180-day deadline. It comes on the August the 28th this year, 2017. The 12-month deadline falls at the beginning of March next year. The 18-month deadline obviously in September next year, and then in March 2020 you've got the 2-year deadline. A number of specific things that have to be achieved by those deadlines, and a certification that you've got to submit to evidence the fact that you've achieved those deadlines. But let's look first at the requirements. The key first set of requirements are the 180-day ones, sections 500.02, 03, 07, and 16. And those are the creation of a cybersecurity program itself, the creation of a cybersecurity policy, the appointment of a CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, the dealing with access privileges, putting in place the appropriate processes, procedures and methodologies for ensuring access privileges are managed correctly, tackling the requirements around cybersecurity personnel and necessary threat intelligence, and an incident response plan. These are all major areas. They're all fundamental to effective cybersecurity. They're all the elements that are essential for any organization, even in its early stages of creating a cybersecurity culture. You have to have somebody who owns it. You have to have a organizationally endorsed and widely understood policy. You have to ensure that everybody across the organization has the appropriate skills and competences, and you have to recognize that through unauthorized access to information comes the major set of security challenges, so dealing with access privileges and dealing with cyber incidents. Those are the key first steps in building a cybersecurity program. By the end of the first year, the CISO should have produced a report on the state of cyber compliance. You should have penetration testing and vulnerability assessments thoroughly underway. A risk assessment should have identified key risks for you to address. Multi-factor authentication should be in place, and you should be training and monitoring the effectiveness of the management system across the organization. 6 months after that, in other words, the 18-month deadline, you need to have a full audit trail around security and incidents. Your application security needs to be comprehensively sorted by that same date. You need to be clear about the data retention requirements and to limit data to your retention policy. Again, training and monitoring extended, and the encryption of non-public information should be complete. Within 2 years, you need to have taken your cybersecurity policy and spread it across the whole of your supply chain, particularly dealing with frontline service providers. Some of the biggest cybersecurity incidents of recent time have come because of vulnerabilities in organizations which have been exploited because of security weaknesses in their suppliers. So the first requirement is that you've got to get compliance and then you've got to certify compliance. The regulation applies to covered entities. They're defined. We talked about the definition of covered entities last time, and the requirement is that all covered entities have to certify compliance by February the 15th in 2018. The question is, do you have to certify compliance with all of the elements of NYCRR 500? And the answer is no, you don't. You essentially have to certify compliance, just going back, of everything that had to be in place by a date prior to the 15th of February 2018. And as the regulation came into force in March 2017, everything that has to be delivered within the first year falls outside of the first requirement. The first requirement is, did you have to have it in place by prior to February the 15th, and that means all of the elements identified as being requirements for the first 6 months, or by the middle of August. So that's what you have to certify. You have to submit a certification in compliance, demonstrating compliance with those requirements by February the 15th, 2018, and you've then got February the 15th, 2019 and February the 15th, 2020 as the target dates by when you've got to demonstrate certification. You've got to lodge certification to demonstrate compliance with the requirements of the year 1 and 18-month stroke year 2 requirements. So much tighter deadlines for putting meeting the requirements, but a extended period for the point at which you have to certify compliance. That's the first, and this has been a regular FAQ. We know about it, and also, of course, it's on the NYDFS website. So let's look at the requirements around appointing a Chief Information Security Officer. It's a 180-day requirement. You've got to have completed it by August the 28th. You've got to certify that there's a CISO in place by February the 15th, 2018. And the key things you're looking for in a CISO are, first of all, somebody who understands the business processes that you're operating and your organization as a whole, and somebody who's going to be a trustworthy advisor to senior management. It is a C-suite appointment. You may choose to designate an internal staff member as a CISO. The benefit of that, of course, is that they will have a thorough understanding of how the business operates, and that should enable them to better assess and guide what's needed to protect the organization. Internal staff member, they may not have adequate exposure, adequate understanding of the threat landscape or of potential security solutions, may not be sufficiently senior, and so the alternative is that a covered entity could either recruit a full-time CISO or alternatively outsource the role to an affiliate or to a third party. And the benefit of that is that effectively you're appointing a senior member of management, even if it's only on a part-time basis, but somebody who will bring weight, experience and knowledge to the role, although of course the disbenefit might be they don't have a full understanding of your business operations. Your challenge as an organization is to work out where the right balance between those things are. One of the questions asked is the extent to which, if a covered entity is using an employee of an affiliate as the CISO, does the covered entity have to satisfy the requirements of 500.04? And the answer to that is that to the extent a covered entity uses an affiliate's employee to serve as its own CISO, the affiliate isn't a third-party service provider. So the third-party service provider elements do not have to be dealt with simply because you're using an employee of the affiliate to be a CISO or to provide CISO services. However, the covered entity, you have to nevertheless recognize that you retain full responsibility for your entity complying with the requirements of Part 500 at all times, and that means that the CISO, even if they're employed by an affiliate, insofar as they are your CISO, are performing the duties that the regulation says are required to be performed. So that makes it clear CISOs can be employed by somebody else. Insofar as they're working for you, they have to fulfill the requirements that you place on them, and the organization for whom they are or to whom they are contracted, that organization does not have to meet the third-party service provider requirements. The role of the CISO and appointing the CISO is the first step, getting the CISO embedded in and enabling the CISO to produce an annual report to the Board of Directors on the cybersecurity program and the associated risks is something which has to be done for the first time by the first anniversary of NYDFS coming into force. So that falls outside of the 15th of February 2018 certification requirement, but nevertheless you need to have it in place by the beginning of March. And the first report would be the one that you make prior to the 1st of March, and you'll then make additional reports on an annual basis thereafter. The report needs to cover the confidentiality of non-public information held by the entity, the integrity and security of your information systems, particularly in relation to the non-public information which you're processing, the policies and procedures that you've got in place and the way in which those are appropriate for the threat landscape, the threats and vulnerabilities that you have to deal with, the requirements of users and of customers. You need to identify the specific material cyber risks, and that's important because there are hundreds and thousands of minor unimportant cyber risks, but there are a smaller number of material cyber risks, any one of which can have a catastrophic or significant impact on the organization. So identifying what material cyber risks there are and the overall effectiveness of the entity's program, cybersecurity program, in tackling cybersecurity risks. And so that's going to involve looking at material cybersecurity events that have come up in the time period, any incidents, how incidents have been dealt with. You're going to use techniques like regression analysis and so on to try and make sure, trend analysis, that with incidents and events you've identified the root cause and you've enabled yourself to tackle and deal with root cause. No good simply identifying that one thing has happened multiple times and not connected them and recognize that there's an issue. It's not unusual, for instance, that a major cybersecurity breach in an organization is preceded by 3, 4, 5, 6 minor cybersecurity breaches over a period of some 6 or 9 months prior to the major breach. And it's recognizing that minor cyber breaches could be either evidence of inadequate defense or evidence of attackers looking for a foothold, but it's failing to connect up those that means that organizations suffer significant breaches. And so the regulation is looking for, in the CISO's annual cybersecurity assessment report, that those kinds of incidents and events are properly tracked and decisions made about how they're going to be dealt with. So that's the CISO and the CISO's report. Let's talk a bit about application security. Of course, applications, as we know, are those pieces of software that sit on top of an operating system, and they're how we process information. Applications are fundamental to our business, and it's application level security that's critical. Yes, of course, operating systems are equally important, because if somebody can get into the application system through inadequate cybersecurity controls at the operating system level, you've got a breach. But applications, typically financial systems, customer data processing, financial applications, all of those are where the key information about customers and non-public information is held. So 500.08 requires that there are written procedures, guidelines and standards to ensure that secure development practices are deployed in your existing applications. It's worth starting to look at applications you've had in place for a number of years and determine whether those were securely developed or not. That's going to involve evaluating, assessing and testing any applications that were developed externally. If you know that your internal development processes don't follow secure coding guidelines, don't follow secure testing guidelines, now's a good time to be thinking about how you might revisit that and look to get to the point where your applications themselves are secure. The part of secure coding is, of course, ensuring that as new vulnerabilities are identified, they're patched. That's usually easier to do if you're using vendor-supplied software, harder to do with software that you've developed entirely yourself, or which has been subject to significant amendments to meet your own requirements. And looking at how you ensure the security of those applications is a key part of embedding security inside the organizations. The CISO, or qualified designated competent person, has to carry out a regular review of procedures, guidelines and standards that are in use inside the organization to ensure that they're continuing to be effective and appropriate in the light of the threat landscape and of the risk assessment. So the first stage, as we've seen, is beginning to look at putting in place a policy. The second stage is in the overall maturity of your cybersecurity program, is making sure that the supporting procedures and guidelines are going to be kept up to date and kept appropriate for the requirements of the organization. Again, there's lots of evidence to suggest that where organizations have breached, it's because policies and procedures that 2 years ago or 3 years ago were right haven't been kept up to date, and therefore practices have become outmoded, and cyber criminals have been able to identify and exploit gaps in the human part of the threat landscape. And it's really the risk assessment policy and procedures that should drive those documentation and procedural reviews. It's impossible for any central authority to tell every single covered entity exactly what it should be dealing with. You're dealing with different customers, you have different applications, different non-public data. What you do have to do is carry out a risk assessment. You have to identify, as we've already seen, the non-public data that you're holding. You have to assess risks to the availability, confidentiality, and integrity of that data. And in doing that, you're looking really at the likelihood of some identified threat exploiting an identified vulnerability and the impact on the covered entity if that happens successfully. So you need to do an initial risk assessment, and section 500.09 sets out the requirement for a risk assessment, for a policy that says how you're going to do the risk assessment, that sets out a very clear set of steps to do a risk assessment. How do you identify likelihood and impact, for instance? What are the definitions of confidentiality, integrity, and availability? How do you determine likelihood? How do you quantify impact? And having documented how you do the risk assessment, you need to ensure that it can be repeated from year to year as you review and update the risk assessment. You want to be able to review how you arrived at the decision a year ago, maybe using different staff at the time, and ensure that you're updating, you're not repeating the risk assessment. And so a robust, consistent, reproducible methodology is an important part of an effective risk assessment policy. You're supposed to be considering the very broad range of risks to the entity's operations. And those risks are going to relate to information systems, all the non-public information you've collected and are storing, the controls you've put in place, and there are risks, of course, to those controls. Some of them may work, some of them may get out of date, some of them may become ineffective, technology may advance, and your risk assessment, therefore, needs to keep account of what we call the state of the art. So documented risk assessment policy, measures for evaluating and classifying threats and risks, conditions setting out when you're going to do the assessment and how you're going to judge the suitability of current controls in terms of minimizing potential exposure of confidentiality, integrity, or availability of non-public information in the context of the risks that you've identified, and then a plan to determine how you take that risk assessment and the controls which you select, and how you then make sure the controls are working in a way that brings the identified risk down to an acceptable level. So one of the questions that is asked from time to time is how a covered entity should address cybersecurity issues in respect of its subsidiaries and affiliates. And the practical answer is that where the subsidiary or affiliate presents risks to the covered entity itself, then you've got to evaluate those risks as part of your own risk assessment activity, part of your cybersecurity program and policies. And that's quite logical, because if, for instance, you have a subsidiary processing part of the information, part of the non-public information that's used in relation to your specific customer-related services, then you have a risk if they're exploited. So yes, the answer is that you must consider affiliates and subsidiaries where they are presenting risks. That's not a blanket in every case, but where they're presenting risks, yes, you must include them in your risk assessment. Your cyber compliance program, cybersecurity program, has to be appropriate to your organization's information systems and business operations. And that's driven both by the specific sector you're in. If you're in the insurance sector, or if you're in funds, or if you're a large organization or a small organization, you might have different security requirements, and you've got to therefore place cybersecurity in the context of your business and the guidance that you should be deploying in terms of how you develop that cybersecurity program should be not just around how do we reduce risk affects the business, but we should also be asking how can we use cybersecurity management to enable the business to perform better. In other words, you should be thinking about what we'd call a win-win situation. Don't let cybersecurity become simply another cost on the organization, but look at how effective cybersecurity compliance can reduce time out, can improve effectiveness, can reduce the amount of data you're storing, can improve competitiveness in relation to clients. All of those are kinds of areas you should be thinking about cybersecurity enabling the business to perform better and more effectively. So competitive advantage, cybersecurity is a business enabler if done right, and we've seen this across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of our clients over the course of the last 15 years. Done right, cybersecurity does help drive a consistent, high quality customer experience in an environment where customers increasingly trust their supplier because they know the supplier not only is secure but has methods of demonstrating that they've externally validated their security. So while technology in today's environment is typically going to be at the forefront of considering a cybersecurity set of objectives, the strategy itself should go further than simply looking at technology. It should look at the customer experience. It should look at the development of products and services, ensuring that they're themselves safe and secure. We've talked about the supply chain and third-party suppliers, but you should also be looking at how you can influence external bodies and how they might influence the way your cybersecurity program is developed. And of course, it's possible you'll have other compliance and regulatory requirements as well. So if you're providing services into the European Union, you've got the upcoming General Data Protection Regulation to comply with, and you need to be looking at ways in which you can integrate GDPR compliance or any other data-related compliance, New York data breach reporting regulations, for instance, how you can integrate all of those requirements into a single management system that enables you to cost-effectively demonstrate compliance to these requirements. So we see in our clients that really good, strong cybersecurity strategies start off with a clear vision about how cybersecurity is going to protect and enable the business to achieve and deliver value. It's going to therefore serve up very clearly identified business priorities around cybersecurity. You don't have infinite resources. You need to spend money specifically and wisely to generate the biggest bang for the cybersecurity buck. And then around that, you can build the right team. And even a small organization with an externally employed but appointed CISO and a small number of people inside the organization with a role can be tied into understanding how to contribute to effective change management, crisis management, managing risks in relation to third parties, and of course all of the strategic communications that come out of that. And you don't want just the CISO to be able to handle that, you need the right team to deal with it. As your cybersecurity strategy becomes embedded and mature, you'll want to be looking at ways of how you can widen the scope across the supply chain. You'll want to look at new and improved and maybe more cost-effective methods of treating risk, as well as dealing with new and emerging risks. As you will have seen if you've been looking at the media over the course of the last few weeks and months, the changing cybersecurity landscape is very significant. There are new and very major threats emerging all the time. So being aware of them and planning for them is as important as being prepared to deal with contingencies. However good your security is, it won't be 100% good. You're going to have cybersecurity incidents. That's why your annual report asks for them to be included in the report. So you need to have something in place, a tested incident response plan that enables you to gear up, respond very quickly where there's an incident. And that's about much more than technology. That's about planning a response, training staff to be able to respond. And that becomes then part of the organization's culture. And cybersecurity really should become a cornerstone of how the organization operates. How important is cybersecurity? Well, in the year 2016, according to New York's Attorney General, there were 1,300 data breaches reported. The New York data breach reporting requirements ensure that they're reported. That's a 60% increase on the prior year. The personal records of 1.6 million New Yorkers exposed. That's very, very big, 1,300 reported data breaches. Those are significant issues, and you can see therefore why the logic of a set of regulations which drive effective cybersecurity in organizations which have got highly sensitive, valuable, non-public information. When you look at the range of breaches, 40% of them came from an external attack, a breach driven externally. 24% of them were by mistake, inadvertent disclosure. So when we mentioned the two key areas in the 180-day program, the access privileges and application security, they both talk to those areas of breach. 40% of external systems being breached, 24% inadvertent disclosure. Skimming, insider wrongdoing, loss of device, there's a declining areas of breach and only relevant to ever smaller parts of the covered entity universe. Looking about major areas, make sure you're not vulnerable to external breach, make sure that inadvertent disclosure don't happen. Those are the key areas to be focusing on in developing your cybersecurity program. And in thinking about your cybersecurity program, of course, you're thinking about the threat landscape. There is the attack surface, in simple terms, is people, processes, and technology. If you can find a weakness in technology, exploit it. If not, you look for weaknesses in processes, or you'll take advantage of people's knowledge being inadequate. That's the attack surface. That's the vector through which you attack. And the people who are looking to attack are incredibly wide-ranging, from non-target specific automated attacks looking for known vulnerabilities all the way through to nation states and competitors looking to take out significant chunks of other organizations, sectors. The SWIFT breach is an example of organized crime attacking a financial system. Threat types range from malware, web attacks, denial of service attacks, and include social engineering. Most types of useful attack are available for free or at a fee. You don't need to be a genius to be able to access and deploy attack software anymore. Many attackers look to breach a target, and once they're inside the target, they'll look for assets that are worth stealing. They don't necessarily look to get into the target because they want a specific asset. It's much more opportunistic than that. And so intellectual property, payment card data, PII, money, if they can transfer money out, they're going to. Again, that's back to the SWIFT attack. And of course, that means you lose those assets you used to have, your reputation damaged, you lose potentially valuable commercial information. There are resources available when you're thinking about how you're going to tackle the threat landscape, what should be part of the CISO report. The Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center is a logical starting point. It's partnered with DHS. It provides alerts on current attacks and threats, free membership. You can see the URL right there. And then there's also the Financial Services ISAC Information Sharing and Analysis Center. There's a membership fee for that, but it is the financial industry's global resource for cyber and threat intelligence analysis and sharing. And so if you can afford it, it's the kind of service which is worth building into how you're going to inform and support your CISO in dealing with the requirements to manage information security effectively. Cybersecurity compliance has to be built around the controls which are going to be effective in the attack surface. And so we saw the attack surface is made up of technology, process, and people. So you'll need personnel, technical and procedural controls. And of course, it's all taking place in a physical environment, so you'll need physical controls as well. You need to identify risks in those areas, make sure that the way you design and implement the controls is going to reduce the likelihood of the identified threats exploiting the identified vulnerabilities. And then you need to resolve and deploy those controls, make sure they're working effectively, and then look to improve the controls on the basis of how effective they are or are not. The requirement also isn't just that you put controls in place, but that you keep an audit trail that enables you to demonstrate how you've identified, detected, and responded to cybersecurity events. And this, interestingly, mirrors a requirement in the EU GDPR, which says you have to keep audit trails around data breaches, so you can demonstrate that you have the right controls in place and that the way you've responded is in line with the requirements of the regulation. So you have to be able to reconstruct material financial transactions for not fewer than 5 years. So if you have a major breach and your data is corrupted, you have to be able to reconstruct those material financial transactions. And you have to have audit trails that enable you to respond to events that might materially harm any part of normal operations for not fewer than 3 years. So significant requirements in terms of building up resilience and robustness in the organization as you go forward. In terms of where do you get controls from, there are a number of different sources. One logical source is ISO 27001. It's an international standard for information security. Annex A, and ISO 27001 is increasingly widely used in the financial sector and the legal sector as well as others in the United States. There's 114 controls, and they cover that broad range of requirements: physical, personnel, procedure, and technology. As you can see, they start with information security policies and deal with asset management, operation security, and all the rest. So good source of information on appropriate controls to put in place. ISO 27001 itself as a standard enables you to make the step of not simply making your certification submission to the department, but also having an external audit which enables you to say to customers and partners that you've taken your responsibilities seriously. ISO 27001 is a best practice solution that applies across multiple compliance and regulation requirements and enables you to demonstrate through a risk assessment. And one of the best tools to use for risk assessment is vsRisk. It's a product designed specifically for information security risk. It matches into ISO 27001. It enables you to access and deploy the Annex A controls as well as the controls developed by the National Institute of Science and Technology. So ISO 27001 is the most practical way to deploy a joined up management system that will help you meet your cybersecurity program requirements. Just briefly, ISO 27001 is a family of standards. The two key standards are 27001, which sets out the requirements for how to manage information security, and ISO 27002, which deals with the set of controls in Annex A of ISO 27001. The common standard, ISO 27000, applies across the whole family and contains standard definitions. And any cyber compliance program wants to use standard definitions because it's a way that you can avoid argument over what, for instance, is integrity or what is a data breach. You have a standard definition, you can then manage the program in a way that enables you to demonstrate compliance with your regulatory obligation. So ISO 27000 is a widely available standard. It's you can buy it from ANSI, from North American Standards Institute, or from any other standards organization. You can obviously buy it from IT Governance. It's a couple of $100, and it gives you a standard against which, as I said, you can be externally audited to demonstrate compliance with globally recognized best practice. I touched briefly on vsRisk. It's a product designed both for small and large organizations. It's a risk assessment tool. It enables you to assess the likelihood and impact of a wide range of threats exploiting known vulnerabilities in relation to specific assets, including obviously non-public information, and then to select the controls that you want to put in place to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. The vsRisk can generate audit reports, so it helps meet the requirements around auditability of your cybersecurity program. It's geared for repeating and reviewing the risk assessment on an annual basis. Again, helps you meet the requirements of NYDFS, and it can flow through into an ISO 27001 documentation toolkit. It's thoroughly embedded in ISO 27001, and so that can make the process straightforward. It uses a wizard to do the risk assessment, so you don't need a substantial amount of training. You can deploy this on a desktop, you can put it on a network server. It can enable you to incorporate, if you're dealing with payment card data, PCI DSS controls as well as other controls. So it's a very sophisticated tool designed to make risk assessment really easy. In Vigilance software, you can watch the video on how vsRisk works. There's a link to it in the slide. Vigilance Software is an IT governance subsidiary. For the sake of transparency, you can be sure that the tools developed inside Vigilance Software will work in any other solutions that IT governance is able to make available. As part of working to and our long-term mission has been to help organizations get cyber secure. We've made a number of resources available through itgovernance.usa.com. There is a couple of free green papers on the regulation and mapping alignment between the NYDFS requirements and ISO 27001, and which talks about how you can use the standard to evidence compliance to NYDFS to deal with your other regulatory reporting obligations. The next webinar in the series is a guide to risk assessment, so another webinar again free, and there's more information on the IT Governance USA website, as you see there, both about the regulation and about ISO 27001. There's also a bunch of practical tools available. There is certified training which is delivered in online environments, so it's designed to recognize that you've probably got a few other things to do and you may not want to go into a classroom and lose the whole of a day. So it's training you can attend from your home or from your workplace. It's a one-day foundation course on how to use 27001 to achieve NYDFS objectives, followed by a 3-day course for CISOs, for those involved in implementing a management system. And again, it goes in some detail through how to use the standard to implement a externally auditable management system, which will also meet the requirements of NYDFS, as well as being able to go on your website as a certification. The documentation toolkit I've referred to, the version which is available from IT Governance USA, will give you compliance to NYDFS and to other US regulations if they're relevant, all in the same set of templates, and simply a set of templates. There's a policy template, templates for how to write audit procedures, templates for application security and so on. They're all in the documentation toolkit, and there is, for anybody booking on the certified training courses, there is a 20% discount for that toolkit. I've mentioned the risk assessment software. You can buy it directly from Vigilance Software or obviously from IT Governance. IT Governance is a distributor for its subsidiaries, and we've talked about ISO 27001. So really practical tools, and these are tools which we've developed over 15 years. We've used them around the world. Our consultants have used them, clients have used them. We've documentation toolkit has probably been used in something like about 10,000 organizations around the world right now in multiple regulatory environments. So really well-established, solid tools that you can use to take the pain out of getting yourself compliant. We are, as I said pretty well at the beginning, a one-stop shop for organizations tackling IT compliance. IT compliance and cybersecurity is the biggest and most critical area for organizations in terms of managing risk over the next 5 to 7 years. The escalation of cyber risk and the proliferation of cyber regulation is such that being able to turn to a single organization who can help you deal in a way that's appropriate for your culture and requirements with cyber and compliance risk is a key thing for you to do. So IT Governance USA is the place that can give you a very broad range of support, all properly integrated and designed to help. Finally, you can access our LinkedIn group. There's a LinkedIn registration there. It's an opportunity to share information around NYDFS cybersecurity requirements, pose questions, and all that sort of stuff. Please do feel free to join that. It's a free facility we've created for everybody tackling cybersecurity in New York and, of course, more broadly around the United States. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the end of what I prepared to say, and so if there are any questions, now is the time to be asking them. And the one logical question is, are there any templates available for cybersecurity policy or risk assessment? And the simple answer is yes. That cybersecurity toolkit that I mentioned is designed absolutely. It's got templates that are written for you. They are easy to customize, and so they'll give you your cybersecurity policy, they'll give you the risk assessment policy and guidelines, they'll give you application security policy, they'll give you audit guidelines and procedures. Every single document that you're likely to need, bar very detailed technical documents, are all going to be in that toolkit. So that's a good thing to have, and if you, as I said, if you combine purchasing that with booking yourself on one of the ISO 27001 NYDFS training courses, then there's a discount on the toolkit for you as well. And that kind of looks like I've managed to answer the questions that you might have asked, because there are no other questions. So I hope that means that in the course of this webinar I've dealt with the first sets of questions that you've got. If not, if there are other questions that occur to you as we end this webinar, please do ask them either through the LinkedIn group that we talked about, or do email us directly. That's servicecenter@itgovernanceUSA.com, and we'll do our best to provide answers to that. But otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, apart from the next webinar, which, as I said, is coming up soon, you can get details of that also on the website, which is about risk assessment specifically. We're done here for today. I'd like to wish you all a very good day. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a good afternoon.